Episode, I will be going over all of Jonathan Toews' best moments from the Game 5 OT winner against the Blues to winning the Conn Smythe in 2010. I will talk about all of the vintage memories from Toews' 16 years in Chicago. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today is Wednesday, April 19th. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you can also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And real quick, whether you're a consistent listener of the show or a first-time listener, please make sure to go and show some support if you haven't done so already. Make sure to go and subscribe to the YouTube channel because that would really help me out tremendously. While you're there, smash that like button, go and comment down below, and turn on those push notifications so that you can get notified when the episode gets uploaded to YouTube every day. And for all you audio listeners, you can also follow the show 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. You can also go and leave me a review on either Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, which I would also greatly appreciate. Make sure to go do all of that good stuff, folks. It only takes a quick second. I greatly appreciate all of your support. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As always, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And thank you all for making the show your very first listen here to start off your day. Of course, I'm sure you all are aware by now by the title of today's episode, a little bit of a bittersweet show here this afternoon as I will be going over all of Jonathan Toews' best moments and memories during his 16 years with the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, that means Jonathan Toews' Blackhawks career has come to a close. We all know this already. The Blackhawks made this announcement leading up to their final game of the regular season against the Philadelphia Flyers. And in typical Jonathan Toews fashion, he left us with one more vintage Taser moment before calling it a wrap in Chicago. So, yeah, kind of a tough episode to go through here today, but I'm not going to lie, writing down some of these memories and also seeing some of the memories that you listeners out there shared with me either in the comments section or on social media. By the way, if you have a favorite Toews moment that you want to share as well, make sure to go and shoot that down below in the comments section. Or if there's maybe an underrated moment of that's in your mind that you think some people are forgetting about throughout Jonathan Toews' historic career. I mean, it's kind of easy to do, right? He left us with so many lasting memories. So if you have one that you think is a little bit personal or one that's kind of underrated, make sure to go and leave that in the comment section down below as well. I want to read them all. So make sure to reach out with your favorite Toews moment of all time as well. But yeah, going through my list of some of the favorite memories that I wrote down, I had to go back and watch all the highlights just to give me those feels and those goosebumps once again, and serve as another reminder of how special those Chicago Blackhawks days were. I mean, so many incredible memories, so blessed and so fortunate to grow up with that team. It's pretty crazy. Like most of these, basically all of the memories that I have of Toews came from well before I was doing this as a job or as a career. It was, just kind of when my fandom was starting or when it was growing and when I was in the peak of, really falling in love with the game of hockey. Now I'm obviously still in love with the game, but that's really, when I was in that honeymoon phase, I guess you could call it, when you got your new baby and the Blackhawks were playing incredibly well, obviously, large part thanks to the leadership and leadership abilities on and off the ice from Jonathan Toews. So yeah, a lot of special memories here as I go on down this list. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My number one favorite Jonathan Toews memory, these aren't really in any particular order except for maybe the first two or three. The rest of them are kind of just jumbled all around. But my number one favorite Jonathan Toews moment of all time is undoubtedly Game 7 of the opening round series in 2011 against the Vancouver Canucks. And yes, the Blackhawks did unfortunately go on to lose that series in overtime. Goddamn, Alex Burrows with the overtime winner, Chris Campoli, who some of you may remember, some of you may not, a trade deadline acquisition by the Blackhawks that season, makes a pretty brutal defensive zone turnover. To be fair, it was a heck of a play by Alex Burrows to snatch that puck out of the air, throw it down, and then house a shelfer past Corey Crawford. But anyways, the reason that game even got into overtime was because of the effort and the heart and the tenacity of Jonathan Toews, because the lone goal that the Blackhawks scored in regulation came in the dwindling minutes of that third period. They were down 1-0. They were also shorthanded. I believe there was just under 4 minutes left. The Blackhawks are down 1-0, while also down a man. Jonathan Toews pulls off just a vintage Jonathan Toews type of play. At center ice, he strips Alex Burrows of the puck, turns around, goes into the offensive zone up the left wing, dangles through Dan Hamhuis, defender for the Canucks, while trying to get back to the center of the ice. Hamhuis knocks him down. The puck finds its way on net. I believe Marian Hossa put it on net. Jonathan Toews, on all fours, is the first man to get to that rebound in between three Canucks defenders, one of them being Alex Burrows, the other being Dan Hamhuis. Toews wins the race to the loose puck and chips it past Roberto Luongo to tie the game 1-1. And this also, by the way, came after the Blackhawks were down 3-0 in this series against the Vancouver Canucks. They won game 4. They won game 5, a vintage Ben Smith OT winner at the UC in game 6. And then game 7, backs against the wall. Jonathan Toews comes up huge to get the Blackhawks on the board and to tie the game. And I think my favorite part about this play was the call from the announcers. Sadly, don't know their names off the top of my head, but it's one of my favorite hockey calls of all time. The announcer goes, there's some guys that give you second and third efforts and can give you a second and a third wind. Jonathan Toews gives you sixth and seventh efforts. And that was just the heart and perfectly encapsulating the heart and the willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done. That was a perfect moment of what Jonathan Toews' entire career was, making a beautiful defensive play to strip Alex Burrows, dancing to the slot, getting knocked down. But you know what? He wasn't going to let that stop him. He gets to the loose puck, knocks it home to tie the game up 1-1. And it was just an incredible moment. I know the Blackhawks went on to lose that series in game 7, but just an incredible display of sheer will from Jonathan Toews in that moment right there. Dan Hamhuis too. If you go back and watch these clips, by the way, I'm going to try and post on social media all of these clips with a little bit of my commentary to go over it. But if you go back and watch the clip of Jonathan Toews scoring that goal, Dan Hamhuis is full on head on the ground in disbelief that Jonathan Toews was able to get to that loose puck, get by him, and tie the game up 1-1. I just thought that was a perfect moment that captured exactly what Jonathan Toews was as a player. The guy that would do anything on either end of the puck to get the job done. A completely unbelievable moment there from Jonathan Toews that I think I will personally remember forever, and that's why it is my single favorite Jonathan Toews moment of all time. My second favorite Jonathan Toews moment of all time is kind of a two-parter here. It was his determination and sheer will against the Anaheim Ducks in the 2015 Western Conference Finals, not only in Game 7, which is, what everyone kind of remembers, but don't forget about what Jonathan Toews did in Game 5 as well. 2-2 series. The Blackhawks are on the road in Anaheim, down 2 goals with under 2 minutes left. Toews strikes twice with just over a minute. The second one coming from an unbelievable angle to tie that game up 4-4 and force overtime. Unfortunately, the Ducks would go on to win quickly into OT. I believe it was Matt Bolesky with the game winner for the Ducks, but that actually wound up being Anaheim's last win of the season. The Blackhawks win Game 6 on home ice, and then in Game 7, who buries them? The captain, Jonathan Toews, a goal just 2.5 minutes in, beautiful rebound out in front. And then the second one on the power play, an absolute howitzer of a wrister from the right dot, putting the Blackhawks ahead 2-0 early and really setting the tone. The Blackhawks would go on to get more goals from I got goals from Hossa, I believe, from Saad, and from Brent Seabrook to seal the deal. The last one from Siebes, a slap shot from the point, really put the dagger in him. But Jonathan Toews set the tone early in that Game 7 to break the Anaheim Ducks. It was a very physical and honestly one of the closest series the Blackhawks had throughout their dynasty run. That series against the Ducks might have been the most nervous I was in any series that the Blackhawks had in the postseason. They were, being physical. They had Ryan Getzlaf, Corey Perry, Ryan Kessler, really deep in physical two-way forwards, and Jonathan Toews wound up breaking them in Game 7 with 2 huge goals in the first period. Both those games will be memories that I'll never forget of Jonathan Toews and just all the big goals that he scored for this team. Of course, he's, leading them to get out to a 2-0 lead in Game 7. That's just what Taser did at his peak, baby. That's my second favorite Jonathan Toews moment of all time, is what he did in those final games of the Western Conference Final in 2015 against the Anaheim Ducks. My third favorite Jonathan Toews moment of all time, after this, they're not in any particular order, but my third favorite, moment of Captain Sirius's career was Game 5 against the St. Louis Blues in 2014. The Blackhawks were down 2-0 early on in that series. They win Games 3 and Game 4 on home ice. Game 5 heads into overtime, and the puck finds its way onto Jonathan Toews' stick for a breakaway from center ice in. Pat Foley, most of you probably remember his iconic call of this game. It's one of the best that Pat's ever done. Jonathan Toews goes forehand, backhand, 5-hole, I believe, on Ryan Miller, and then hits the vintage on one knee Toews Selly along the board, gets bear hugged by all his teammates. Both the call and the goal from Jonathan Toews are things I'll absolutely never forget. I also love the call from NBC Sports's broadcast team when this game was nationally televised. It was a very simple call. I don't know why I love it so much, but Jonathan Toews on a breakaway, he can win it. He does. Just a very simple call, but one that, I don't know, it just stood out to me. I just love the simplicity in it, and that's kind of what it was when Jonathan Toews was on a breakaway, just simple, backhand, forehand, 5-hole. He made a career off that one kind of breakaway move, and beating the Blues obviously never gets old. The Blackhawks would go on to close that series out in 6 games. Always feels good beating the Blues. An incredible moment there from Jonathan Toews to put the Hawks back ahead 3-2 in that series, en route to going on and advancing in the postseason. That's my third favorite Jonathan Toews moment of all time. Next up, again, now these are kind of in no specific order, but one of the best moments of all time for Jonathan Toews has to be his second career goal against the Colorado Avalanche. And just to make all of you out there who are listening and watching this feel old, this goal came all the way back on October 19th, 2007. Unbelievable. Feels like ages ago. 2007, excuse me. A long time ago, but that was, the start of it all. And a couple of days before, Jonathan Toews scored his first NHL goal in his first NHL game on his very first shot. But this one is kind of the goal early on in 19's career that everyone remembers, right? Just a dazzling move around a couple of defenders, has a ton of speed, dekes around the Colorado Avalanche netminder. And another great call from the Avalanche broadcast team on this one. They said, no matter if you're a fan of Colorado or Chicago, that is an unbelievable goal. But the one that sticks out, the one quote that sticks out the most, was when the Avs announcer said, "This is the kind of talent that can bring a franchise back from the dead." And boy, I don't know who that broadcaster was, but they were absolutely right. The start of all the magic for the Blackhawks was in that 2007-2008 season when both Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews were rookies. Kaner, of course, goes on to win the Calder Trophy. Toews finishes in third, and the rest is absolute history. But a couple of dazzling goals early on in Jonathan Toews' career made it pretty clear that he was going to be a special player in this league, and boy, was he ever for his 16 years that he spent with the Chicago Blackhawks. All right, there are my first couple of favorite moments from Jonathan Toews' time in Chicago. Coming up in just a moment, I will get into a handful more vintage Taser memories. But first, real quick, I need to talk to you all about FanDuel, because grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers, you can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet loses. All you got to do is go and visit fanduel.com/lockedon, place your first bet, and you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus bets if your bet doesn't hit. And for all my Cubs fans out there tonight, I got the Cubs money line. They're going for the sweep of the Oakland A's. Come on, let's stay hot, baby. MLB betting has been going good so far here in April. Let's stay hot with a Cubs money line victory tonight as they sweep the A's. Make sure to get in on the action and don't miss out on your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. You just got to go to fanduel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Real quick before I get into segment 2, I do want to let you all know what I have planned coming up on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Of course, the Rockford IceHogs are kicking off their best-of-3 play-in series against the Iowa Wild later on here tonight. Tomorrow's episode, I will be going over a recap of Game 1 and talking about what went well for the IceHogs, what didn't work, and what they need to do to close out this series. Or, hopefully they'll be getting off to a 1-0 series lead, what they can do to close it out in Game 2, or what they need to do to stay alive in Game 2, regardless of the result. And also coming back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast will be my season recaps/season report cards. I'll be going over each player for the Chicago Blackhawks and discussing how their seasons went. And I'll also be dishing them out a grade. And by the way, I'll be asking all you fans on social media, Twitter, Instagram, I'm going to be posting tweets asking what grade you think each of these players deserve. So make sure to go and follow at Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram and also follow at Talkin' Hockey on Twitter so you can vote on all of these report cards. Lots of good stuff coming up on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. So make sure to be sticking around throughout the off season. All right, getting back into the swing of things, segment 2, let's talk about some more vintage Jonathan Toews moments. Listen, there hasn't been a lot of fun episodes here on Locked On Blackhawks throughout the last year, considering where this team is at in their rebuilding process. I know I said it's kind of a bittersweet episode because, this means that Toews' time with the organization has come to an end, obviously, but at the same time, with the Stanley Cup playoffs going on, most of these memories are from Toews and the Blackhawks playoff runs. So it is kind of fun looking back and remembering and reminiscing on the brighter days of this organization. And hopefully we're not too far away from creating some more of those types of memories with a new group that's coming up for the Chicago Blackhawks. Anyways, enough of my rambling. My next favorite moment that I want to talk about from Jonathan Toews' time with the Blackhawks. This is honestly kind of a personal favorite and may not wind up on a lot of your lists personally out there, but Jonathan Toews, this is up there on one of my favorite Taser moments. It was the second game of the 2018-19 season for the Chicago Blackhawks. This was when I was still attending the University of Missouri, and the Blackhawks had a game at, I think at the time it was Enterprise Center. Scottrade Center. I think it was still Scottrade Center at the time. Now it's Enterprise Center. Regardless, I was still attending Mizzou, and the second game of the season was Blackhawks Blues in St. Louis. And a couple of my buddies had tickets. They had an extra. They asked me if I wanted to go, knowing I was a big Blackhawks fan, and I jumped on that opportunity very quickly. I was the only Blackhawks fan that was part of the group, but it wound up being a much better night for me than it did for my Blues fans, as Jonathan Toews wound up tallying a hat trick, including the overtime winner to lift the Blackhawks to a 5-4 victory. It was actually the first hat trick that I had ever seen in person, and it was perfect. I was down in the 100 level. I was actually right behind Ryan Miller, I think, was in net for the Blues at that. I can't remember who was in net at that time. I don't think it was Ryan Miller. Regardless of who it was, I was right behind the Blues net. Jonathan Toews scored the game-tying goal in the third period to force OT, and then, just like he did in Game 5 in 2014, 4+ years later, gets a breakaway from center ice in with 2 goals on the night, absolutely houses a shot glove high for the hat trick. The first moment where I got to throw my hat on the ice, and I was in enemy territory in St. Louis, absolutely hearing it from the Blues crowd as I'm chirping my booty off, walking out of the arena. It was an awesome moment. probably weren't too many more awesome moments for the Blackhawks. That was 2018-19. I believe that's actually right before they fired Joel Quenneville. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that was the same timeline. So it was a classic Taser moment, though, getting the hat trick. As I said earlier, always fun beating the Blues, especially when I'm there in attendance with Blues fans. It gives me the bragging rights. And it was also the first time I got to throw a hat on an arena. First time I had seen a hat trick in person. So shout out to Jonathan Toews for besting the St. Louis Blues a couple of times while in St. Louis, thanks to overtime breakaways. The next moment of Jonathan Toews' career that I wanted to talk about was Game 5. I didn't scroll down far enough. I apologize. Still reading the same list. Was breaking the drought that he had. I think it was an 8 or 9 game goal drought in the second round against the Detroit Red Wings way back in 2013. Of course, the Blackhawks won game 1 of that series, but then went on to lose games 2, 3, and 4. And game 4 was when Jonathan Toews had a little bit of a mental breakdown on the ice after, he had been going through that goal drought to kick off the postseason. He also took 3 consecutive penalties in that second period of game 4 against Detroit. Brent Seabrook, a very vintage Siebesy moment, had to go over there and kind of calm Jonathan Toews down and let him know, hey, you're too important to us. We need your head in this series. I know you're frustrated, but we still got a long ways to go. The Wings would go on to win game 4 to go up 3-1 in that series, but the Blackhawks never say die. Were simply too good. Attitude would go on to thrive in games 5, 6, and 7, as they did oftentimes during those vintage Blackhawks days. Didn't really matter what you did in games 1 through 4 because we were going to win games 5, 6, and 7. Mostly games 4, 5, and 6. Honestly, we didn't hit game 7 all that often. Didn't have to win those too frequently, but games 4, 5, and 6 are when the Blackhawks thrived. And in game 5, Jonathan Toews helped the momentum get back on the Blackhawks side, snapping that goal drought of his, scoring a big power play goal en route to a 4-1 victory. And obviously in that series, the rest is history. The Blackhawks go on to win game 7 in overtime, an incredible OT winner from Brent Seabrook. Shouldn't have even been necessary had the officiating been, on top of their game. Nicholas Hjalmarsson actually would have gone down with the overtime or the winner late in the third period. But hey, it wound up not mattering. The Blackhawks get the job done one way or another. But Jonathan Toews breaking his personal goal drought and helping momentum get back on the Blackhawks side in that game 5, I think is kind of an underrated moment for Taser in his Blackhawks career. Another kind of underrated moment because, it didn't really ultimately end up meaning that much for the Chicago Blackhawks was Taser's game 5 winner against Arizona in the first round of 2012 to force that series back to Chicago. Now, again, not that notable because, the Blackhawks went on to lose game 6 at home. And funny enough, I actually remember Corey Crawford really struggling in that first round series, and a lot of people being upset and not really having a lot of faith in Corey Crawford after kind of letting the ball slip out of his grasp in his second year as the starter. His first year as the starter, 2011 against Vancouver, went decently well, but the Blackhawks lose in the first round ultimately, and then losing in 6 games to Arizona really felt like there was a lot of folks who weren't all that confident in Corey Crawford's abilities at that time. And what does he go out and do in the lockout? Short 2013 season, goes on an absolute tear, even though it wound up going to Patrick Kane that year. I still think that Corey Crawford probably should have went on to win the Conn Smythe. I believe he had a goals against average below 2, I recall, throughout that playoffs. So, anyways, 2012, I can get sidetracked with so many Blackhawk stories looking back on all these memories. But yeah, Jonathan Toews, a huge overtime winner in game 5. I remember being like 12 or 13 years old, staying up late, watching at my buddies because this was a game that was out on the West Coast in Arizona. The Blackhawks were down 3-1 to the Coyotes. What a weird time. Down 3-1 in game 5 on the road. Jonathan Toews right off the faceoff blows a shot past Mike Smith, forcing game 6 back in Chicago. At the time, it felt like it was very monumental for the Blackhawks to get back to the UC. As I mentioned, though, they end up dropping game 6 against the Yotes at home, but probably went on to motivate this team to be a heck of a lot better in 2013. And of course, they went on to win their second Stanley Cup in 4 years during that season. Another vintage Taves moment that I think is a little underrated as well is what he did in the 2020 COVID postseason, which would actually be the last hockey we saw out of Tazer for a while, because after that, he went on to miss the entirety of the COVID shortened 2021 season due to chronic immune response syndrome. But people forget in that 2020 COVID postseason, Jonathan Taves was a man on a mission, particularly in that opening round series against the Edmonton Oilers. Had a huge redirect goal in game 4 of that series to help lift the Blackhawks to a 3-1 series win. He had 7 points in 4 games against the Oilers in that 2020 first round series, playing, kind of the last, well, it actually was the last postseason hockey we got to see out of Jonathan Taves with the Blackhawks, but that was like the most dominant we've really kind of seen Taves, well, I guess 2021, but the most dominant we've seen him, the last dominant playoff action we'll see from Taves in his Blackhawks career. He also went on to add 2 points in 5 games against the Vegas Golden Knights, where the Blackhawks got eliminated. So all in all, 9 points in 9 postseason games for Jonathan Taves. Was, typically a point per game guy in the postseason. I don't think a lot of people remember how good he was in that 2020 first round series. He was incredible on the top line for the Blackhawks to lift them over the Oilers, who, for whatever reason, the Blackhawks just always seem to have their number. And then another vintage Tazer moment, of course, going back to his first career postseason hat trick, 2010 against the Vancouver Canucks. Back-to-back years where the Blackhawks got the better of the Canucks in 6 games. Those were some epic battles back and forth, and I still don't know to this day if there's another team I've hated quite like those Vancouver Canucks. I mean, some incredible rivalries, and always fun to get the better of them. Jonathan Taves was huge in that series in 2010 to help the Blackhawks move on to what was their first Stanley Cup in 49 years. A huge hat trick in Game 4. I remember one of them being a very lucky bounce off the end board, centering right to Jonathan Taves. The hat trick was on a 5-on-3, a beautiful feed, by the way, from Dave Bolland, another Blackhawks legend, to find Jonathan Taves wide open in the slot all by himself. First postseason hat trick for number 19. Always fun beating the Vancouver Canucks for the second consecutive year. The Blackhawks would beat them in 6 games to advance on into the postseason, and that's when Jonathan Taves went on to win his Conn Smythe. 29 points in 22 games for the captain. An incredible run. 22 years old, winning the Conn Smythe. Being the first Blackhawks player to hoist the Stanley Cup since 1961 on the way. Some incredible moments from Jonathan Taves in those 2009 and 2010 series against the Vancouver Canucks. All right, coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, I will get into my final couple of favorite Jonathan Taves moments. But first, I got to talk to you all about Athletic Greens and their new AG1 product, because with just 1 scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and probiotics to help you start off your day. And this special blend of ingredients truly is incredible, folks. It'll help support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, and even your aging. And Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by both health experts and professional athletes. Plus, it'll cost you less than $3 per day, which is just such a cheap and easy way to invest in both your health and your body. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D, along with 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is go and visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and to pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, before I wrap things up for today's show, I still do got a couple more vintage Jonathan Taves moments and memories to go over. And by the way, if you're still tuned in to this point of the episode, first, let me say thank you very much. And second, make sure to go and comment your favorite Taves moment down below in the comment section. Or if you have, an underrated Taves moment or kind of a personal one that most other people wouldn't think of, make sure to let me know of that down below in the comment section. All right, getting into my final Taves memories and moments. One of them that I also think kind of doesn't get talked about enough is what Jonathan Toews did in Game 6 against the Boston Bruins in 2013. Now, of course, everyone remembers 17 seconds, Ryan Bickell being the hero, tying the game, Dave Bolin scoring the game winner 17 seconds later to steal the cup in Boston. Not a lot of people talk about what Jonathan Toews did in that game as well, because until those final 2 minutes, the only goal that the Blackhawks had scored in that game was a shorthanded tally from Jonathan Toews on a 2-on-1 with Patrick Kane, I do believe, actually. Toews beats Tuukka Rask 5-hole to tie the game up 1-1 while shorthanded. And don't forget, Jonathan Toews also had the primary assist on Brian Bickell's game-tying goal. Now, some will say that Duncan Keith made that play by jumping, pinching up, and keeping it alive along the boards, but Jonathan Toews made a heck of a cross-crease pass to find Brian Bickell, find his tape beautifully right in front of the net backdoor to beat Tuukka Rask 5-hole, tying the game 2-2. A lot of people just remember Bickell's game-tying goal and, of course, the fourth line coming through for the game winner 17 seconds later. And while that's fair, Jonathan Toews also very much so impacted that game by scoring a shorthanded goal to tie it up 1-1 and getting the primary assist on Brian Bickell's goal. So don't forget all the efforts that Jonathan Toews had in that Game 6 as well to help the Blackhawks steal the Stanley Cup out of Boston. Another classic Taser memory is the highlight reel goal he had against the Detroit Red Wings. And when you think about Jonathan Toews' highlight reel goals, a lot of people think about obviously the beautiful goal that he scored against the Avalanche, his second NHL goal, which I discussed earlier. One that actually a couple of folks mentioned on Twitter today was Toews' beautiful goal in the outdoor game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, the only outdoor game the Blackhawks have actually ever won. Jonathan Toews with a beautiful move to dance around Brooks Orpik and then sneak a shot through future teammate Marc-Andre Fleury's 5-hole. That, of course, is a beautiful Toews goal as well. But the one that always stuck out to me for some reason was his beautiful inside-out forehand, backhand goal against the Detroit Red Wings. And just classic Toews IQ here, because it's a 1-on-2. He's the only Blackhawks forward up on the rush going the other way. But what does Jonathan Toews notice? He notices that he's stuck in a 1-on-1 situation with Dan Cleary, who played forward for the Detroit Red Wings, but in this instance got caught back on defense. Toews recognizes that, goes outside, inside past him. As he skates by Dan Cleary out with the puck on his backhand, he goes forehand back to the backhand to give himself a wide open goal. The vintage get on one knee Toews sally afterwards. It was just an absolute marvelous goal from Jonathan Toews that also, I think, captured the type of player that he was. He could beat you with the finesse moves, maybe that's not what he was necessarily known for, but he had some finesse in him and could do some dangling in tight to score a pretty goal, and also to recognize that the Red Wings had a forward back on defense and Dan Cleary, and that he could kind of open it up a little bit. It's just the IQ that Jonathan Toews provided on a night-to-night basis that helped him score a highlight reel goal against the Detroit Red Wings early on in his career. How could I also forget another incredible Jonathan Toews moment? I know this one kind of gets remembered more so as a Patrick Kane moment, but the 2-on-1 in overtime of Game 5 of the Western Conference Final against the Los Angeles Kings. It was like a perfect situation. The Blackhawks end up with a 2-on-1. Who do they got on it? Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, the two guys you'd exactly want in that situation. Jonathan Toews finds Kaner with an absolutely perfect feed, and Kaner houses it past Jonathan Quick, hits, boom, the heartbreaker celly, one of the best that we've actually seen some other players use as their own cellies now. That's kind of the era that we're in now, as kids growing up watching Kane hit the heartbreaker celly or using them their own. But yeah, it was a perfect moment for the Blackhawks in the Western Conference Final. Toews and Kane on a 2-on-1. You didn't get those types of opportunities all that often, and boy, did they make it count. Toews sets up Kane for the OT winner. The Blackhawks, of course, go on to win the Stanley Cup. Classic moment between 88 and 19 right there. And then the last moment I have, I know I'm undoubtedly forgetting some. That's why I want all of you to comment down below. What did I forget? Where's the underrated moment that somehow slipped my head? Um, the last moment that I have is Jonathan Toews' final goal and his final game with the Blackhawks. He was always so clutch for this team. Why would anyone expect anything different but for him to find the back of the net in his send-off at the United Center? Athanasiou finds Toews in the slot, a beautiful redirect, and then hits the vintage Toews Selly along the boards. A perfect way for Jonathan Toews to go out, of course, on a night where all anyone really cared about was, aside from the Blackhawks losing, was Jonathan Toews finding the back of the net one more time. Awesome video montages and tributes, and to have him mic'd up was super special. It was an unbelievable night at the UC for Toews to find the back of the net. It was a perfect storybook type of ending. It could have gone out, I guess, with the Blackhawks winning the Stanley Cup, but we were so grateful to get 3 and 6 years while Jonathan Toews was here. An unbelievable run for the Blackhawks that, again, would not have been possible without the captain. And again, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now without what Jonathan Toews did for this organization. So I'm sure it won't be the final time that I say it, but one more time, thank you, Jonathan Toews, for creating all these moments, for having the determination, for having the sheer will, for having the leadership abilities, and never saying die, backs against the wall. This guy always did whatever he could to find a way. And without that, I don't know if I'd be here where I am today. I highly doubt it. And I certainly wouldn't love the Chicago Blackhawks and the game of hockey the same had it not been for everything that Jonathan Toews did. So thank you, number 19. We really greatly appreciate everything that you did. And we'll never forget you and the run that you had in your time with the Chicago Blackhawks. All right, I think that is going to wrap up Wednesday, April 19th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all again for tuning into the show. As always, make sure to go and show some support if you haven't done so already. Go and follow along the podcast 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each and every day. Once again, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you can also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, that's going to do it here for the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.